This is WFYI News Now. It's November 26th, and I'm Drew Dodlin, filling in for Aubriana Herron. On today's show, why over 100 students left the new Broad Ripple Middle School since the beginning of the academic year. A Midwest hydrogen hub will get up to $1 billion to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. An IMPD officer was charged with a number of criminal offenses, and an Indianapolis man and a fair housing organization are suing 2 rental companies for alleged discriminatory tenant screening policies.
Records that were not supposed to be still showing. He had paid his debt to society, had turned his life around, yet was still being punished because of that essentially bad data.
Those stories coming up, but first, Indianapolis saw several incidents of gun violence over the weekend. A total of 14 people were shot, 2 of them are in critical condition, and 2 others died, according to the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. The incidents started on Saturday. IMPD responded to 5 shootings and continued on Sunday with 8 more reports of gun violence. This weekend brings the total toll of gun violence this year alone to more than 300 injuries and more than 170 deaths. The configuration of grades in Indianapolis Public Schools had a rocky start, causing over 100 students to leave the new Broad Ripple Middle School since the beginning of the academic year. From WFYI's Education Desk, Sydney Dauphiné has more on where these students went and why.
The new Broad Ripple Middle School opened this August as part of a district-wide plan to provide more equitable education called Rebuilding Stronger. Weeks later at a board meeting, parents and students complained about the behavioral problems, poor communication from staff, and other issues. Sumitra Gate had a 6th grader and an 8th grader at Broad Ripple. After that board meeting, she toured Northview Middle School in Washington Township.
I don't think it was fully a push out of Broad Ripple as much as maybe we were kind of disappointed in how the school went. But then we see this and see what great leadership is.
Gate switched districts. Now, over 70 other students have transferred from Broad Ripple to Washington Township since the beginning of the school year. Others left for different schools. Enrollment cuts means less money for the district to spend on academic programs and teacher pay. I'm Sydney Dauphiné.
The U.S. Department of Energy will give a Midwest hydrogen hub up to $1 billion to start planning projects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including at BP's Whiting refinery. This first step in the process is expected to take more than a year, but Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel reports Northwest Indiana activists feel the DOE is moving the BP project along without considering residents nearby.
Just Transition Northwest Indiana opposes BP's plans to store its carbon emissions underground. It worries pipelines carrying the CO2 could explode or leak, threatening public safety and drinking water. In January, Whiting resident Lisa Valley had to seek emergency care when toxic fumes from the refinery made it hard for her to breathe.
The thought of mixing this dangerous carbon dioxide underground with the huge refinery that has been known to have issues right in our backyards is literally horrifying.
Leaders with the hub say carbon storage is safe and that the hub plans to engage with communities hosting projects over the next year. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
The Midwest Hydrogen Hub says it could be years before the BP facility is built, which will allow the company to train workers for the hydrogen plant. We couldn't reach the DOE in time for comment. An Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department officer has been charged with numerous criminal offenses, including felony voyeurism and misconduct. Shane Decker had been on administrative duty while an investigation was underway. Decker is accused of using department-issued equipment to record sex acts without the knowledge of the people in the video. Decker has been suspended and recommended for termination. And for our final story today, an Indianapolis man and a fair housing organization are suing 2 rental companies for alleged discriminatory tenant screening policies. WFYI's Aubriana Herron has more.
Marcus Williams and the Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana filed 2 class action lawsuits against Progress Residential and Tricon Residential. They allege the 2 rental companies' denial of housing to applicants with certain criminal or eviction histories disproportionately excludes Black people and women. Amy Nelson, the executive director of the Fair Housing Center, says Williams ended up homeless because he was rejected at these properties, even though his criminal record had been expunged.
Records that were not supposed to be still showing. He had paid his debt to society, had turned his life around, yet was still being punished because of that essentially bad data.
A spokesperson for Progress Residential says they aim to have a fair and equitable screening process for all applicants. A statement from Trican Residential says the organization, quote, adheres to all fair housing laws. I'm Abriana Herron.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by me, Drew Dodlin, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music. If you liked today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.